I never imagined my life would change on that freezing cold morning. As I was rummaging through the trash behind Don's Diner in Queens, NYC, my fingers numb and my stomach empty, Alina Ellie Miller, a calm voice said from behind me. I turned around slowly, a bag of leftover lasagna still in my hands, and found myself face to face with an elegant man in a perfect suit holding a black briefcase. I have news that will change your life. You have inherited $50 million, he said. But before you continue, make sure to smash that subscribe button and leave a comment below telling us where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories are reaching. I'm 64 years old, and for the past 6 months, I'd been surviving on discarded food from restaurant dumpsters. This wasn't how I'd envisioned my life when I married Robert 30 years ago. He was an architect. We had a comfortable life in a nice suburb of Boston. Our daughter Skylar grew up with everything she could ever need. But when Robert died of a heart attack a year ago, I discovered we were buried in debt. He'd mortgaged our house, lost money on risky investments, and hidden it all from me. Within a few months, I lost everything. My daughter Skylar, now married to a Wall Street exec, refused to help me. You and Dad were always so bad with money, she said the last time we spoke. As if the debt was my fault, too. Ethan and I aren't going to throw away our dough, get a job, but who hires a 64-year-old woman without a college degree? I'd worked as a secretary before I got married. After that, I dedicated myself to the family. My years of experience as a homemaker didn't count for anything on a resume. I tried for jobs as a salesperson, a cleaner, a receptionist, but nothing. When the bank foreclosed on the house, I went to a shelter. After 2 weeks, when my meager savings ran out, I started sleeping on park benches. That's when I became invisible. People would walk right past me on the street as if I were a fire hydrant, just an obstacle to get around. I learned the unwritten rules of the street, which dumpsters still had good food, which parks were safe to crash in. How could I wash up in public restrooms without attracting attention? That morning started like so many others. I woke up shivering from the cold under my cardboard boxes. I packed my few belongings into the worn backpack I carried everywhere and walked 3 blocks to Don's Diner. He opened at 7:00 a.m. for breakfast, and at 9:00 a.m. he would toss the previous day's bread. There was always something good there. I was just grabbing a still sealed bag of bagels when I heard footsteps behind me, the firm steps of expensive leather dress shoes. I turned, ready to be chased off or insulted as had happened so many times before. But the man standing there in a dark gray suit and red tie just looked at me with a neutral expression. Alina Miller. My heart sped up. Nobody had called me by my name in months. On the street, I was just ma'am on a good day or homeless on a bad one. Who's asking? I said. My name is James Stevens. I'm an attorney at Stevens and Associates. He took a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. The paper was thick, luxurious. I've been looking for you for weeks, he said. How did you find me? We hired pies. Finally, an employee at this diner mentioned that a woman came here regularly in the morning. I squeezed the bag of bagels tighter against my chest. What do you want with me? I don't have any money if this is a bill. On the contrary, Miss Miller, I'm here to inform you that your brother, Franklin Miller, passed away a month ago in Chicago. Frank, my older brother, we hadn't spoken in almost 20 years. Not since that terrible fight at our parents' funeral. He moved to another city and we never had any contact again. I didn't even know he'd died. I'm sorry, I murmured, not knowing what to feel. We'd been so close as kids, but life had pulled us apart. Your brother left a will, the lawyer continued. You are the sole heir to all his assets. The total value of the estate after taxes and fees is approximately $50 million. The bag of bread slipped from my hands and fell to the ground. $50 million. More money than I had ever imagined. Is this some kind of cruel joke? My voice came out weaker than I intended. No, ma'am, he said. Your brother made a fortune in real estate in Los Angeles. He never married or had children. He left everything to you. I looked at my dirty clothes, my hands rough from hard work and the cold. I looked at the impeccably dressed lawyer in front of me who showed no sign of contempt for talking to a homeless woman. There is one condition, he continued. Your brother left a letter that you must read in person at his house in Beverly Hills. We have tickets booked for this afternoon if you can accompany me. In that moment, I thought of my daughter Skylar who had denied me help when I needed it most. I thought of the months of sleeping on the street, the daily humiliations, the abandonment, and something inside me hardened. Can I go like this? I asked, gesturing to my dirty clothes. We've provided a hotel room so you can clean up properly. The flight leaves at 7:00 p.m. As we walked toward the waiting car, an idea began to form in my mind. If I really had inherited all that money, there was something I needed to do first. Life had given me a second chance, and I wouldn't waste the opportunity to settle some scores. The setup. As the luxurious sedan glided through the streets of New York City, I watched the world from a new perspective. Yesterday, I was invisible. Today, I was an heir to a fortune. The same people who ignored me when I asked for spare change would now open doors for me. The driver looked at me through the rearview mirror with poorly disguised curiosity. I still looked like a bum, but I was being treated like royalty. The lawyer, James Stevens, remained respectful the entire time, explaining details about the inheritance while I absorbed everything in silence. My brother Frank had built a real estate empire in Los Angeles. Luxury condos, boutique hotels, commercial properties, all generating millions annually. Why me? I finally asked when we pulled up to an elegant hotel. Frank and I haven't spoken in decades. Your brother kept a detailed file on you, James replied. He knew about your marriage, the birth of your daughter, the death of your husband. He followed your life from a distance. Did he know I was on the street? The question came out as a whisper. He only found out in the last weeks of his life. That's when he changed the will and instructed me to find you immediately after his death. In the hotel room, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for long minutes. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, tangled gray hair, a face aged by the sun and worries, and the dull eyes of someone who had lost hope. I took off my dirty clothes and got into the shower. Letting the hot water, a luxury I hadn't felt in months, wash away the grime, and with it a part of my recent past. The hotel had provided clothes for me, basic but clean and the right size. As I got dressed, I thought of Skylar. My only daughter, whom I had raised with so much love, had turned her back on me in the most difficult moment of my life. I can't jeopardize my family's future because of your mistakes, she had said, denying me a place in her spacious house. Her husband, Ethan, stood beside her, arms crossed like a security guard. There are shelters for people in your situation. The week after my eviction, I passed by their house and saw Skylar and Ethan getting into their new BMW, laughing about something. Skylar was carrying a designer handbag that I knew cost thousands of dollars, hidden behind a tree. I watched as they left for another comfortable, worry-free day. That night, I slept on a park bench, curled up against the cold. Life on the street taught me many lessons, but the most painful was discovering who truly cared. It wasn't the friends from the fancy dinner parties Robert and I used to host. It wasn't my own daughter. It was people like Mrs. Rodriguez, a woman who also lived on the streets and shared her blanket with me on a particularly cold night. It was Dawn, who sometimes would forget a wrapped sandwich on top of the dumpster where I could easily grab it. As the lawyer and I had dinner in the hotel restaurant, I devised my plan. Before going to Los Angeles, I needed to make a visit. Mr. Stevens, I'll need some decent threads for tomorrow, I said, savoring the most decent meal I'd had in months, and I'd like to postpone our trip for a day if that's possible. Certainly. May I ask the reason? I have some unfinished business here, I replied simply. The next morning, in new clothes and with my hair styled by a hotel stylist, I looked like a different person. The driver took me to an address I had memorized, even though I'd never been there. The office where Ethan Harrison, Skylar's husband, worked as a chief financial officer. I entered the imposing building with renewed confidence. At the reception, I announced Alina Miller to see Ethan Harrison. Tell him I'm his mother-in-law. The receptionist looked at me in surprise. Clearly, Ethan had never mentioned a mother-in-law, but she made the call. Minutes later, Ethan appeared in the lobby, his face a mask of shock when he recognized me. Alina, what? How? He looked at my new clothes, my styled hair, completely confused. We need to talk, Ethan, family business. He led me to his office, visibly uncomfortable. I sat in front of his desk, observing the framed photos. Skylar and him on luxury trips at elegant parties. In one of them, I recognized my mother's necklace, one of the few heirlooms I had given to Skylar when I lost everything. Ethan, I came to make a business proposal. A proposal? Alina, with all due respect, you were living on the streets a few weeks ago. What kind of proposal could you have? One that involves $50 million, I replied calmly, watching the shock and disbelief on his face and the future of your career. As I explained the inheritance, I saw Ethan's expression change from disbelief to avid interest. When I finished, he was a different man. Subservient, almost fawning. "Alina, this is incredible. You must be so happy. You know, Skylar and I always wanted to help, but our financial situation was complicated. Save the details, Ethan. You both turned your backs on me. Now I have a proposal. I'm going to make a significant investment in your bank, which will undoubtedly boost your career. In return, I just want one thing. Anything," he replied, practically drooling with ambition. "A dinner at your place tonight with Skylar, of course, and a few selected friends that you must invite." I handed him a list with carefully chosen names, important people in their social circle, of course. "No problem. Skylar will be delighted to host you." I left the office with Ethan's promise to arrange everything. He didn't even question the reason for the dinner. $50 million has the power to eliminate inconvenient questions. That afternoon, I bought an elegant dress from one of the most expensive stores in Manhattan. I chose discreet jewelry, but of undeniable quality. I prepared myself carefully like a general before a battle. The woman who looked back at me in the mirror before leaving was no longer the desperate, homeless woman. She was someone with power, and I would use that power to teach a lesson that none of them would ever forget. When the driver pulled up in front of Skylar's house that night, I took a deep breath and smiled. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold, and mine was perfectly chilled. The dinner drop. When I rang the doorbell at Skylar and Ethan's house, my heart was pounding, not from nerves but from anticipation. The door opened, and there she was, my daughter, impeccably dressed in a black dress, hair and makeup perfect. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Mom, what?" she said. "Ethan told me you were coming, but I didn't believe it." She examined me from head to toe, clearly confused by my transformation. "He's Skylar." He kept my voice calm, controlled. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside, letting me pass. The inside of the house was exactly as I had imagined. Expensive furniture, works of art on the walls, everything perfectly arranged. Ethan appeared in the hallway. "Now, all smiles and Alina, welcome to our home," he said. He leaned in to kiss me on the cheek as if we were old friends. Skylar still looked at me with suspicion. "Ethan told me some crazy story about an inheritance." "Is it true?" she asked. "Perfectly true," I said. "My brother Frank passed away and left me everything. Approximately $50 million. I watched her face go through a series of emotions. Disbelief, shock, and finally something I recognized immediately. Calculated regret. "Mom, that's wonderful." Suddenly, she was hugging me. "I'm so happy for you." I accepted the hug without returning it, smelling the expensive perfume she was wearing. This was the same perfume she wore the day she told me to find a shelter. The living room was already filled with guests. Ethan's work colleagues, some wealthy neighbors, friends from the country club. They were all looking at me with curiosity, trying to figure out who this elegant woman was who was causing such a stir. Ethan soon made an announcement, introducing me as his dear mother-in-law, who had returned from a long stay abroad. The lie came easily to his lips. No one needed to know that just yesterday I was sleeping in a cardboard box. During dinner, sitting at the head of the table as the guest of honor, I observed the social dance around me. Suddenly, I was fascinating. People who would have crossed the street to avoid a homeless woman now hung on my every word, laughing at my simplest jokes. Skylar was beaming, acting like a devoted daughter. "Mom has always been so independent," she was saying to the guests. "After Dad passed away, she decided to travel to find herself. Every false word was a stab, but I smiled and sipped my wine, waiting for the right moment. It was during dessert that Ethan, already intoxicated by the wine and the prospect of millions, made a toast. To my wonderful mother-in-law, Alina, who honors us with her presence and soon with a business partnership that will transform our lives." Everyone raised their glasses. That's when I stood up, glass in hand. "I'd also like to make a toast," I said, my voice clear and firm. "To the truth." A curious silence fell over the table. "The truth is a precious thing," I continued. "For example, the truth about where I've been for the past 6 months. Skylar shot me a warning look, but I continued. "After my husband passed away and I found out we were in debt, I lost our house. I came to my daughter asking for just a temporary roof over my head until I could get back on my feet." Ethan went pale. Skylar squeezed her napkin tightly. But Skylar and Ethan told me I was a burden, that they couldn't compromise their lifestyle. They suggested I find a shelter. The guests were now looking uncomfortably between us. I spent the last 6 months living on the streets, sleeping on park benches, and getting food from dumpsters. Just yesterday, I was rummaging through the trash at Dawn's diner when my brother's lawyer found me. The shock was palpable. A woman dropped her glass and it shattered on the floor. "Mom, please," Skylar murmured, her face red with embarrassment. "This is not the place for this kind of conversation." "It's not," I said. I thought family was exactly for difficult moments. I looked around the table. While I was sleeping in the cold, my daughter and son-in-law were celebrating promotions and buying new cars. While I was begging for spare change to eat, they were planning vacations in Europe. Ethan stood up, trying to take control of the situation. "Alina is going through a difficult emotional time, the sudden inheritance." "Shut up, Ethan," I said firmly. "You only started treating me like a person when you found out about the money. Until yesterday, I was invisible to both of you." I pulled out some photos I had printed that afternoon, pictures of myself in rags sleeping on a park bench. Me rummaging through dumpsters, I placed them on the table. "This is me 3 days ago. This is the truth you tried to hide." The silence was absolute now. Skylar started to cry, more from shame than from regret. I knew it. "I came here tonight to say goodbye," I concluded. "I'm leaving for Los Angeles tomorrow to receive my inheritance and start a new life, a life without people who only value what I have, not who I am." I took my purse and walked toward the door, feeling all eyes on me. Before leaving, I turned one last time. "Ethan, there will be no investment in your bank. And Skylar, that necklace you're wearing, the one that was your grandmother's, is the last thing you'll ever get from me." When I stepped out into the cool night, I felt a weight being lifted from my shoulders. The driver opened the car door, and before getting in, I looked back at the lit-up house, imagining the chaos I had left behind. Revenge wasn't as sweet as I imagined. It was better because it wasn't just about humiliating them. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my truth, and that I discovered was worth more than $50 million. A new life, a hidden legacy. The flight to Los Angeles that night took me to another world. Sitting in first class, being served by attentive flight attendants, I reflected on how life can change so drastically in such a short time. 2 days ago, I was sleeping on cardboard. Now I was crossing the country toward a new life. James Stevens sat next to me, going through documents for part of the flight. Eventually, he put his papers away and turned to me. "You haven't slept much," he observed. "I have a lot to think about," I replied, looking out the window at the endless blue below. "And a lot of questions about my brother." "Your brother was a reserved man, but extremely shrewd in business," James said. "He started with a small investment in a dilapidated building in the arts district of LA. He renovated it and turned it into luxury apartments. Then he started buying more properties, always with a long-term vision." "Why did he never reach out?" I asked. James hesitated. "I believe that will become clear when you read the letter he left. He had his reasons. The old fight that had separated us seemed so distant now, almost insignificant. We were young and stubborn, both convinced we were right about the division of our parents' modest inheritance. I chose the few items of sentimental value, my mother's necklace, my father's collection of books. Frank kept the money, which wasn't much at the time. I accused him of being greedy, and he accused me of being naive. Apparently, he had a business vision I never imagined. In Los Angeles, we were met by a driver who took us directly to Frank's house, or rather his mansion. Perched on a hill overlooking the city, the property was impressive. Modern architecture blended with traditional California elements, meticulously manicured gardens, an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the horizon. "Did your brother live here alone?" I asked, impressed by the size of the place. "With a few staff members," James replied. "The housekeeper, Mrs. Garcia, took care of everything. She's still here, by the way, keeping the house in order until you decide what to do." Mrs. Garcia greeted us at the door, a robust, middle-aged woman with a warm smile. She spoke with a strong Spanish accent, but we could communicate reasonably well. "Your brother talked about you a lot," she told me as she showed me the rooms of the house. "He had your photo in his office." Indeed, when I entered Frank's office, I saw my own picture in a frame on his desk, an old photo from before our disagreement. Next to it was a photo of our parents. It was as if he had kept the family together, at least in photographs. "This is the envelope your brother left for you," James said, handing me a large sealed envelope. He asked that it be opened here in his house. I took the envelope with trembling hands and asked for a moment alone. When everyone left, I sat down in the chair that had once belonged to my brother and broke the seal. Inside were several documents, the official will, property certificates, bank statements, and a handwritten letter. I unfolded it and immediately recognized Frank's handwriting. My dearest Ale, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here, and James has succeeded in finding you. I hope it wasn't difficult. My greatest fear was that you had disappeared completely. First, I apologize for the years of silence. Our disagreement was foolish, like most sibling fights. Too much pride on both our parts, I suppose. When I finally got over my stubbornness and decided to look for you, you had already married and started a new life. I didn't want to interfere. Still, I kept myself informed. I discreetly hired people to bring me news of you, how you were doing, if you were happy. I knew about the birth of your daughter, Skylar. I wanted to meet her, my niece, but I didn't know how to reappear after so much time. When I learned of Robert's death and worse, the situation you were left in, I was already very sick. The cancer was advancing quickly. I tried to act as fast as possible, changing my will, instructing James to find you immediately after my death. Eleanor, I know money doesn't make up for lost years, but I hope it can give you the comfort and security you deserve. I built all this alone with no family, no children. I always wondered who will I leave all this to. The answer was always you, my only sister. One last thing, there is a safe behind the painting on the wall to your left. The combination is our birth dates. Yours first, then mine. Inside is something that has belonged to you for a long time. With love always, Frank. I stood up, my legs weak, and walked to the mentioned painting. It was a beautiful piece of art. I carefully removed it, revealing a small safe. I typed in the combination with trembling fingers and the door swung open. Inside there was a small carved wooden box that I recognized immediately. It was my father's, where he kept special items. When I opened it, I couldn't hold back the tears. There was our mother's necklace, identical to the one I had given to Skylar, which she now wore to parties like a trophy. Frank had bought another one, exactly the same, probably at immense cost. Next to the necklace, a short note to replace the one you gave your daughter. Some family traditions must continue. I sat down again, holding the necklace against my chest, feeling the weight of my family's history, of the love that had persisted despite the distance and silence. Suddenly, the revenge from the night before seemed small, almost insignificant. In that moment, I understood that I had received much more than a fortune. I had received a second chance, not just to live comfortably, but to live with purpose. Frank had watched me for years from afar, unable to help directly. Now I had the opportunity to do what he couldn't, use this wealth to make a difference. When James returned to the office, he found me with red eyes but a serene smile. "Mr. Stevens, I need your help to make some changes to my new financial status," I said, wiping away the tears. "I want to create a foundation." "A foundation, Miss Miller?" "Yes. To help homeless people, people like I was just 3 days ago. I want to call it the Frank Miller Foundation." James smiled and nodded. "It would be an honor to help you with that." That night, I had dinner on the terrace overlooking Los Angeles, surrounded by the wealth my brother had created. But my thoughts were with the people I had left behind. Not Skylar or Ethan, but Mrs. Rodriguez, Dawn, all those who had shown kindness when I had nothing to offer in return. My life had completely changed in 72 hours from a beggar to a millionaire. But the real transformation wasn't external. It was internal. I now had not only the means, but also the motivation to make a difference. Frank's letter, our mother's necklace, our family's legacy. Everything pointed to a new path. A path not of revenge, but of redemption, not of accumulation, but of generosity. Looking at the lights of Los Angeles, I made a silent promise to my brother. His legacy would live on, not only in buildings and bank accounts, but in transformed lives. Starting with mine, building a legacy. The first few months in Los Angeles were a whirlwind of adjustment. There was so much to learn about the empire Frank had built. Properties scattered throughout the city. Lease contracts, investments in various sectors. James Stevens was invaluable, patiently guiding me through meetings with managers, lawyers, and accountants. "Your brother was extremely organized," James explained during one of those meetings. "Each property has its own management team. Each investment is carefully monitored." Little by little, I began to understand Frank's legacy. It wasn't just a fortune. It was a testament to hard work, long-term vision, and integrity. Everyone who worked for him spoke of him with respect. Many mentioned how much he cared about his employees, how he paid fair wages, and took an interest in their families. "Your brother wasn't just a businessman," Mrs. Garcia told me one day as she served me tea in the garden. "He was a good man. When my husband got sick, he paid for all the treatments. He never asked for anything in return. These stories shaped my vision for how to manage my new fortune. Frank had created wealth, but he had also taken care of the people around him. It was an example I intended to follow. While I was learning about the business, I was also working on creating the Frank Miller Foundation. I wanted it to be more than just distributing money. I wanted to create a system that truly helped homeless people rebuild their lives. We need to offer not just shelter, I explained to James and the team I was forming, but also dignity, purpose, and the tools they need to get back on their feet. I studied models of successful programs in various parts of the world. I remembered my own needs when I was on the street. It wasn't just food or a roof. It was also respect, opportunities, and someone who genuinely cared. 3 months after I arrived in Los Angeles, I received an email from Ethan. The message was long, full of rehearsed apologies and transparent attempts at reconciliation. Between the lines, his true motive was clear. After my revelation at the dinner, several influential guests had distanced themselves from him and Skylar. His reputation was stained. In addition, he had been passed over for a promotion at the bank. "We are family," he wrote. "We should overcome our differences. Skylar misses you so much." I deleted the email without responding. 2 weeks later, it was Skylar's turn. Her message had a different tone. There was something that seemed like genuine regret, although it was mixed with self-defense. "Mom, I know I disappointed you deeply. At the time, I truly believed I was doing the right thing for my family. Ethan had just made a big investment in the house, and our finances were tight, but that doesn't justify it. We should have helped you. I'm so sorry." I stared at those words for a long time, conflicting feelings warring inside me. Part of me wanted to forgive. After all, Skylar was my only daughter. Another part of me remembered those cold nights on the streets, the daily humiliations, and how she had turned her back on me when I needed her most. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I continued my work with the foundation. We started with a pilot project in Los Angeles, a center that offered not only meals and temporary shelter, but also medical assistance, psychological counseling, professional training, and help finding permanent housing. 6 months after my arrival, we inaugurated the first Frank Miller Center for New Beginnings. I invited local authorities, journalists, and of course, several homeless people. The mix of guests caused some discomfort among the wealthier ones, but that was exactly the point to show that everyone deserved the same respect regardless of their financial situation. During my inaugural speech, I shared my own story. "Less than a year ago, I was in the same situation as many of our friends here today," I said, gesturing to the homeless people who had been invited with full respect. "I slept on park benches, got food from the trash, and was invisible to most people. It's a situation that can happen to anyone, often due to circumstances beyond our control. We need to stop judging and start helping." The response was bigger than I expected. The story of the homeless millionaire, as the press dubbed me, spread throughout the world. Journalists wanted interviews and television producers offered contracts for documentaries. I rejected most, only accepting those that promised to focus on the cause, not on me. One day after an interview for an international network, I received an unexpected call. Eleanor. The voice was familiar, though I hadn't heard it in months. "It's Ethan. How did you get this number?" I asked, my voice cold. "Skylar is in the hospital," he said, ignoring my question. She tried to kill herself last night. The world seemed to stop. "What? How? Pills?" "I found her unconscious in the bathroom. The doctors pumped her stomach. She's stable, but she left a letter for you." Forgiveness and a new beginning. I took the first available flight back to New York City. During the long hours of travel, my mind spun between worry, guilt, and anger. Part of me wondered if this was another manipulation, an extreme way to get my attention. Another part feared it was true that my own daughter had reached that point. At the hospital. "Mom," she murmured when she saw me. "You came." I sat by the bed and took her hand, feeling the delicate bones beneath her skin. "Of course I came," I said. "After that dinner, after you left, everything fell apart," she said, her voice weak. "People stopped inviting us to events. Ethan lost important clients. I lost friends I'd had for years. We deserve this, Mom. I know what we did to you was unforgivable, but then I saw you on TV talking about that foundation, helping people you don't even know while you turned your back on us. How could I trust you again?" I asked, my voice soft but firm. "You abandoned me when I needed you most." "I know," she whispered, tears rolling down her face. I became the kind of person I always despised. Superficial, selfish, worried only about appearances. I looked at my daughter, my only daughter, and saw not only the cold woman who had denied me help, but also the child I had once held in my arms, the teenager who laughed at my jokes, the young woman who cried on my shoulder when she had her first heartbreak. "When you get out of here," I finally said, "we need to talk, really talk about everything." She nodded, a small glimmer of hope crossing her exhausted gaze. That night, back at the hotel, I finally read the letter she had left. It was different from the calculating emails I had received before. It was raw, honest, full of genuine regret and painful self-reflection. Skylar wrote about how she had looked in the mirror and not recognized the person she had become. About how the public humiliation had been just the beginning of a period of forced introspection. About how in reality she had always known she was wrong, but her pride and materialism had suffocated any compassion. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know that I finally understood what you tried to teach me my whole life, that a person's character is worth more than all the possessions in the world." I folded the letter carefully and looked out the hotel window at the city that had once been my home. I remembered the words in Frank's letter. Some family traditions must continue. I thought about how he, even hurt, had never completely abandoned me, only watched from afar, waiting for the right moment to help. Maybe it was my turn to do the same. The next day when I returned to the hospital, I brought a small box with me. "What is this?" Skylar asked, sitting up in bed, looking a little better. "Something that was returned to me," I replied, opening the box to reveal my mother's necklace. "Not the one I had given to Skylar, but the one Frank had bought as a replacement. It's yours now." She looked at the jewelry, confused. "But I already have one, the one you gave me. This one is different." "This one comes with a condition." "What is it?" she asked. "That you wear it not as a symbol of status, but as a reminder of the value of family, of compassion, of the second chance we all deserve." Tears returned to her eyes, but this time they were different. Not of despair, but of understanding. In the days that followed, we had long conversations about the past, about the wounds we had inflicted on each other, and about the possibility of rebuilding something that had been so deeply broken. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fast. There were times when the resentment came back, when the pain of abandonment seemed too fresh to overcome. But little by little, day by day, we began to find a new path. A month later, when Skylar had fully recovered physically, I made a proposal that surprised us both. "Come work with me at the foundation," I said during a lunch, not in Lowe's Angels, but here. "I want to open a branch in New York City, me working with homeless people." She seemed genuinely surprised. Who better to understand the importance of a second chance than someone who just received one? She considered it for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I guess I owe it to you," she said. "You owe it to yourself. Really, it's not about debt, Skylar. It's about purpose, about using our experiences, good and bad, to make a difference." As we walked through the park after lunch, I thought about how life takes unexpected turns. In less than a year, I had gone from a homeless person to a millionaire, from an abandoned mother to a mentor for my own daughter. Frank had given me more than money. He had given me the opportunity to transform not only my life, but the lives of many others. "Mom," Skylar said softly, interrupting my thoughts, "I'm sorry for everything." I looked at my daughter, not the cold woman who had turned her back on me, nor the child I had once held in my arms, but the complex person she was now, full of flaws and potential like all of us. "I know," I replied, squeezing her hand. "Me too." And we continued walking, no longer prisoners of the past, but looking toward the future. A future that, thanks to a brother who never forgot, we now had the privilege of building together. The True Inheritance, the first Frank Miller Center for New Beginnings in New York City, was inaugurated exactly 1 year after my transformation from a homeless person to a millionaire. I chose the location strategically, an abandoned building a few blocks from where I used to sleep near Dawn's Diner. The inauguration ceremony was simple but meaningful. Among the guests were local politicians, business people, journalists, and most importantly, the homeless people who would be the first beneficiaries. This center is not just a place for meals or temporary shelter. I explained during my speech. It's a space of dignity, of possibilities, of genuine new beginnings. We offer medical assistance, psychological counseling, professional training, help with documentation, and most importantly, a community of support. I looked at the audience and saw faces I had known during my days on the streets. Mrs. Rodriguez, now one of the first residents of our transitional shelter, Dawn, who had become a partner in the project, donating food from his restaurant, and so many others I had known only by their gaze, by a discreet greeting, by the silent solidarity that exists between those who share the same struggle. Skylar was by my side, overseeing every detail of the event. In recent months, she had dedicated herself to the project with an intensity that surprised me. She started in the most basic position, serving meals, organizing donations, listening to stories, and gradually took on more responsibility. "I never imagined I would have such a deep connection with this work," she confessed to me one night after a long day. "I always thought these people were different somehow. Now I understand that the line separating our lives from theirs is much thinner than we imagine. That was the most valuable lesson my time on the streets had taught me, and now it was being passed on." After the official inauguration, when most of the movers and shakers had left, we stayed only with our true guests of honor, the people who would use the center. We served a special meal, not as charity but as a shared celebration. It was during that meal that a man timidly approached my table. I recognized him immediately. George, a man who slept in the same park as me, who once shared his last piece of bread with me. "Miller," he said, his voice trembling. "Do you remember me?" "Of course I remember, George," I said. I stood up and hugged him without hesitation. "How could I forget? When you disappeared from the streets, I thought you had died," he said. "Many of us die without anyone noticing." His eyes filled with tears. "Then I saw your photo in the newspaper, a story so incredible it could only be true. I invited him to sit with us. He was a former college professor who had lost everything after a severe depression followed by the death of his wife. Having been on the streets for 8 years, he had lost all hope for a different life. "I have a proposal for you," I said after listening to his story. "We need someone to coordinate our educational program here at the center, someone who understands both education and the reality of the streets." He looked at me in disbelief. "Me? But I haven't taught in years. I don't even have my papers anymore. We can fix that," Skylar replied, who had overheard our conversation. "Documentation, proper clothing, temporary housing while you get back on your feet. The important thing is your experience and your knowledge." The expression on George's face, that mixture of disbelief, hope, and renewed dignity, was exactly what we had envisioned for the center. It wasn't just about giving people things, but about giving them back a sense of self-worth, the confidence that they still had something to contribute. In the weeks and months that followed, stories like George's multiplied. The center became not just a shelter, but a turning point in the lives of many people. It didn't work for everyone. Some weren't ready for the change. Others faced challenges that were too complex. But for many, it was the opportunity they had never received. 1 year after the inauguration of the NYC Center, the Frank Miller Foundation had already helped more than 200 people find permanent housing and employment. The model was being replicated in other cities, adapted to local needs, but always maintaining the fundamental principle, treating homeless people with dignity and respect, offering not only immediate help, but also tools for a lasting transformation. As for Skylar, our relationship continued to rebuild brick by brick. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, painful memories, doubts about the sincerity of the change, but it was evolving. Ethan, on the other hand, eventually left the picture. His marriage didn't withstand the pressures and transformations of the past months. He never really understood why this became so important to me, Skylar explained when she told me about the separation. For him, it was just a way to regain lost status, to clean up our image. For me, it became so much more. One quiet afternoon, while we were reviewing progress reports in the Sense office, Skylar asked me a question she had been holding on to for a long time. "Mom, have you really forgiven me? Or are you just tolerating me because of the work?" I stopped what I was doing and looked at my daughter. She was no longer the spoiled girl who had once turned her back on me, but a woman who was genuinely trying to redeem herself, to learn, to grow. "Forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once," I replied after a moment. "It's a process. There are days when I remember the cold on the streets, the hunger, the loneliness, and yes, I feel angry that you didn't help me. But I also see who you're becoming now, the good you're doing, and that matters. Do you think you'll ever be able to completely forget?" she asked. "It's not about forgetting, Skylar. It's about not letting the past define our future. It's about using even the most painful experiences as tools to build something better." She smiled slightly, understanding like Uncle Frank did with you, she asked. Exactly, I said. That night, alone in my new apartment, comfortable but deliberately modest given my fortune. I looked at the photo of my brother that I kept on my desk, the same photo he had of me in his house in Los Angeles. You were right, Frank, I said out loud, as if he could hear me. True wealth isn't in bank accounts or properties. It's in using what we have to make a difference. I took our mother's necklace, the original one I had kept, and held it up to the light. It shone softly, carrying with it so many stories, so many generations of love, loss, and redemption. In less than 2 years, my life had come full circle. From the streets to a mansion, from loneliness to a purpose, from abandonment to a legacy. The journey wasn't over. Of course, there was much more work to do, more lives to touch, more lessons. But when I think about that freezing cold morning behind Dawn's diner, when an elegant lawyer appeared like an unlikely angel to announce my inheritance, I can't help but marvel at life's unpredictable paths. It wasn't just the money that changed everything. It was what I chose to do with it. It was the decision to transform a story of abandonment and revenge into a narrative of compassion and renewal. And that I realized was my brother's true inheritance. Not the millions in properties and investments, but the opportunity to make a difference, to continue a chain of kindness that had begun a long time ago, and that hopefully would continue long after my time. As I put the necklace back in its box, I felt a peace I had never experienced. I had gone from the bottom of the barrel to the top of the world. But most importantly, I had discovered that true value was not in either of those extremes, but in the journey between them, in the lessons learned, in the hands extended, in the dignity restored, and that no fortune in the world could ever buy. Now, if you dug this story, hit that like button to subscribe, and tell me in the comments what part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member for access to exclusive videos that I don't publish here.